All right, my great friends, this is Mr. Davis, and I'm going to attempt to give you a quiz review for our test. Well, it's not a test, it's an open notes quiz. So basically, what I want you to do is be able to get a 40 out of 40. So I'm really, get a good start during this time that we're not together, my good friend. So, what I'm going to do most likely is I'm going to post it Thursday night, Friday, somewhere in that time period. And I know we don't have school Friday, so I won't be posting any content, but basically, you'll have the whole weekend to do it. The questions are going to be in random order, so I think I might have said this yesterday. You don't want to call up Johnny and take it together because your and Johnny's questions aren't going to be the same. But this is for Thursday. This would be a review video for Thursday's class content. Now, when I made this, the study guide is pretty much in alphabetical order. It's not in order of chronological events or even separated by the French and the American Revolution. So this Quizlet is also going to be kind of in random in order, but you can kind of follow along and take some notes as we go. All right, so the first thing is the Bastille. So this is the most famous picture of the Bastille. It was a prison fortress, but there was really only like 7 prisoners there. What it was used for was to store ammunition. The Loyalists, the French army that protected the king and was just the national army, they knew that the people should not be able to get all the guns and ammunition at the same place if they were ever to revolt. So they have an area where there's guns and an area where there's ammunition. And this is where the ammo was this prison. They do get the prisoners released. There was like 7 prisoners, and they behead the warden. So that's not fun. All right, next up is our good friend, Benjamin Franklin. There's a lot of good ones you could say about Benjamin Franklin. Images that pop up as he made the first ever political cartoon, and it said "Join or Die." Basically, it was a snake carved up in little pieces representing colonies. He's a famous non-presidential founding father, really big genius. He's the life of the party. He went to France after the war. He helped set up our Constitution as well. He is like the most interesting American in America, kind of. He's like at everything. So he's a pretty big boss, and he's on the C note, which I have tons of C notes now at my house for sure. All right, so this is a picture, of course, of the Boston Massacre. There's 5 people killed, including Crispus Attucks, which I believe is represented right here. He was a freed African American, so he was one of the first 5 to die in the American Revolution. You had kind of patriots that were getting together and heckling tax collectors and other British officials, and they're just kind of on one side versus the other. There's snow during the time, March 5th, 1770. So they're throwing snowballs, possibly some rocks. There's a big bang, and then all of a sudden the troops are firing on an unarmed group of people, and 5 people die. All right, so next up, of course, is the Boston Tea Party. This is led by Samuel Adams. You guys know the story. They're dressing up as Indians. Nobody died in this one. This was a much more peaceful example of a protest. They threw the tea in the harbor, and we know what happens to tea when it gets wet. It's pretty much ruined. But the protesters had to cut a lock to get through into the wharf, get onto the boats, and they actually sent a check for all the locks that they cut to the people that they damaged from, but they didn't send any checks to the British for the tea they destroyed. Thousands and thousands of dollars, and that is what is going to be bringing us to the Intolerable Acts later. This is the Committees of Public Safety here, and let me just see. This is an incorrect This is an incorrect definition here, so I'll change that. But Committee of Public Safety, that was a really ironic term of the French Revolution. And the Committee of Public Safety basically said we're going to keep everybody safe by making sure everyone supports the revolution and cutting off everybody's head that doesn't support it. So kind of ironic that was called the Committee of Public Safety. But the definition here is incorrect. This would be a Committees of Correspondence definition. All right, birthplace of Napoleon. Again, like I said, we're going to bounce around in this Quizlet, but the Quizlet is made to help you study for the quiz. This beautiful arrow here shows Corsica. This is where Napoleon is from, not a mainlander of France. Had an accent, was short, a lot of cards stacked up against him, but he is successful nonetheless, of course. Declaration of Independence. I might ask you, who wrote the Declaration of Independence? It was written by our good friend Thomas Jefferson, who was a statesman and not a soldier. He crafted it, spent about 2 weeks outside of Philadelphia. He got outside of the noise and the hustle and bustle of the city. Spent about 2 weeks on it, and shows Ben Franklin, John Adams. They make minor adjustments, and here it is. This is kind of like the breakup. If you've ever had to text message a breakup to your boyfriend or girlfriend, this kind of saying why we're leaving and sorry, not sorry. Next up right here is the directory. And the directory we talked about yesterday was the thing that pleased no one. The government in France that pleased no one. And here's our good friend Napoleon coming in to take over France. He had it set up perfectly. It's like if you play a golf scramble and your partner hits the ball 1 inch from the cup and you just have to hit it, just tap it in. And that's all Napoleon has to do because the French Revolution had left the country in shambles, and here he comes to save it. All right, this, I'm going to guess, is going to say is St. Helena, or I'm sorry, Elba Island. So Elba Island at first, and I was thinking St. Helena is where he died, but this is where he went to live in exile. He spent about 100 days after. Let me see. I'm just going to pause this. All right, I'm going to pick it back up, so hopefully it's catching me here. So Elba Island is where...
Island off the coast of Italy where Napoleon was sent into exile. Elba Island.
That's pretty cool. Let's see. Go to the next one. This is the estate. So there were 3 estates in France. Let's see. The problem was for the third estate is 1 and 2 always outvoted them. So if there was a tax and they say majority rules, whichever side gets 2 or more votes, that's going to be the winning side. The third estate always lost all votes, and so they had to pay all taxes. The French and Indian War, this is what your essays were about. It was a precursor to the American Revolution. The French and the Indians versus the Americans and the colonists. This is the General Assembly. So the General Assembly, it is different from the Parliament. England has a Parliament where they meet pretty regularly back in this time period. The General Assembly was only called into session if France wanted to pass a tax. That's what it looked like, but it was not a regularly scheduled meeting. This is the Fat King George, although he didn't look too fat. He's got some pretty nice lettuce there. Some George Washington-esque lettuce here. I don't know if he had wooden teeth or not. But King of England during the American Revolution, the Fat King George, not very popular. Looked down on the smelly colonists that smoked tobacco all the time. Here is our great friend George Washington, General George Washington. At this point, and what we're learning about, he is the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. He was a career soldier. He's a redcoat at first, as we know, during the French and Indian War. He signs a confession in French that he couldn't even read. He was a POW at one point, but now he is. I would make the argument, our best president of all time. All right, General George. All right, next up. This was the Great Fear. So the Great Fear took over after the French Revolution and the storming of the Bastille. So the Great Fear was a wave of just senseless panic that went all throughout France. So what was fearful is you could be killed just if it was suspected you didn't support the revolution. The guillotine, not too much to say about the guillotine. It was designed by a pacifist who believed in nonviolence, and yet he creates the death penalty device that, put the death penalty on an express lane. But he did so because it was so inhumane, he believed, how they were doing it beforehand. These were the Intolerable Acts. This was in response to the Boston Tea Party. This just goes and shows you that they had to pay for the tea. They took away their meetings. If British officials got accused of a crime, they would stand trial in Britain and not in the colonies, and that would mean that pretty much if any British official getting accused of a crime by a colonist was going to get off the hook. And a big thing here, the Quartering Act made sure that the Americans were paying to house the British troops and not the British themselves. This is a picture of Jamestown. So Jamestown is the first permanent English settlement in North America, founded in East Virginia. It was kind of right on the border of being a middle colony or a southern colony. Our good friend John Smith ensured its success, but it was a pretty rough way to go. I mean, you had to be a pretty hardened individual if you survived the first few years at Jamestown. This was Sir Walter Raleigh. He also has some nice lettuce, and if you have any beards right now, I know you bros out there that don't have to abide by the facial hair. If you're growing any beards, they say you shouldn't grow beards right now because the coronavirus could get trapped in that beard. So if you got a beard, your dad has a beard, might want to think about shaving it now. All right, so that was Sir Walter Raleigh. Son of a...